Did you at Howard learn anything about the history of journalism? Where do you think English language journalism got started? Yeah. Journalism in the English language, in the sense of newspaper, news sheets, got started during the Puritan Revolution in England in the 1620s and 30s. And the first journalists were Puritan pastors who had probably been Anglican pastors, but they were being persecuted by the Anglican Church because they were preaching Puritan doctrines of worship and revelation. And they were kicked out of their jobs by the Church of England. And so, being jobless, they scurried around publishing broadsheets as to where there were new jobs, what was going on, what had happened to them. So, in a sense, the first experience of journalism in the English language was a result of the persecution of Christians. And that led to a very lively free press in the Puritan period in England between the execution of Charles I in 1649 and the end of the Cromwellian period when Britain was a republic, and that ended in 1660 during the Restoration. But that was where journalism got started. And if you look at the history of journalism in the United States, you find a huge proportion of Christians being attracted to the idea of journalism for obvious reasons, which I will now explain. I wrote a little, I gave a speech that became published as a booklet, and I'm happy to leave this with you, called The Three Callings of a Christian in Journalism. First of all, let's look at journalism as a profession. Journalism is a God-created profession, in the same way that medicine is a God-created profession. Being a lawyer is a God-created profession. These were God's creations in a fallen and sinful world, which He calls upon Christians to redeem by their presence. So, journalism is a God-created profession, and the first calling of journalists is to a God-created profession. Now, what is a calling? Well, I don't have the time to go into all the theological explanations, but in broad terms, I often speak to Christian groups of young people, and many of them know that I've been a journalist, and they say, well, how did you get into journalism? And my response is, I didn't intend to get into journalism at all, but I found, after getting a job in journalism, that I was actually called to journalism. And if you don't know what to do in life, become a banker, I say, because there are two things that will happen. Either you will go crazy and you will spend every waking minute, as I did. I started banking after I graduated from college, thinking about what you really want to do, or you will like it, in which case you found your calling, be a banker. Journalism is not a profession to go into unless you are burning inside to be a journalist. And there are people I have met all over the world, even people from non-Christian traditions, Muslims in fact, who have a calling upon their lives as a journalist. When I recognize this, I am overjoyed, because I realize God's hand is at work. I'll give you one example. I was interviewing for a television program a Palestinian human rights activist on the West Bank back in the late 1990s. And he was a very impressive person, and he had an assistant who was dressed very conservatively in female Muslim garb. She wore a hijab, She had long sleeves, and she wouldn't even shake my hand because I was not a relative or anything like that. I was a male. But when I talked to her, and when she started talking about what attracted her to be this man's assistant, I recognized a powerful call of a journalist, a God-given call. She wanted to write the truth. She was passionate about exposing the truth. And it was wonderful to talk to her because she had all the right instincts. And if you look at the Christian gospel, you find that the writer of the book of Luke and then the book of Acts in the New Testament was clearly an investigative journalist. He starts off writing to Theophilus. I was careful to document all of my sources. I investigated what happened, and this is the account. And in fact, in the book of Acts, you find many titles of people who had jobs in the Roman Empire that are absolutely correct. And for a long time, many skeptics of the gospel said, well, this job didn't exist in the Roman Empire. Well, it did exist, because the writer of the book of Acts took great care to get all of his job positions accurately. So, the first calling of a Christian in journalist is to write the truth. And it is a huge calling. Truth, we know, is Jesus Christ. And everything that is subordinate to knowledge of him, that is, the knowledge of what he created, is God's truth. And what we as Christians are called to do is to write the truth of what happened to a thirsty world, a world that is thirsty for the truth, that is denied the truth both by governments and in many cases by bad journalism, but is dying of thirst to know the truth. So one of the callings we have is to the world. That is, we want to be a blessing to God's creation by revealing to the world what we as journalists can discover about reality in a truthful setting. So we're a blessing to people who read our newspapers, who view our television shows, to the extent that we can reveal things that they did not know from any other source, and which are really truthful. The amazing thing about truth is that it has a powerful influence for good wherever it is uncovered or made available.